France, September 1944. When the Red Cross trucks rolled through the muddy field hospital compound near Reims, 3 German doctors in torn Wehrmacht uniforms expected to face military tribunals, or worse. Among them was Dr. Heinrich Weber, 34, a surgeon from Munich who had spent 2 years patching soldiers in makeshift bunkers. As American medics gestured for them to follow, Weber clutched his battered medical bag, wondering if this was the last time he'd hold surgical instruments. What he discovered in the next 72 hours would challenge everything he thought he knew about his captors. Before we continue, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Here we retell the forgotten human stories of war. The autumn rain had turned the French countryside into a sea of mud, but inside the American field hospital, everything gleamed under bright electric lights. Dr. Weber walked between rows of wounded soldiers, German and American alike, lying on clean white sheets. The air smelled of antiseptic instead of gangrene. For the first time in months, he heard the steady hum of electrical generators powering surgical equipment he'd only dreamed of having at the front lines. Captain James Morrison, the chief medical officer, approached the 3 captured doctors with an interpreter. Weber expected interrogation. Instead, Morrison extended his hand and said something that made the translator pause twice before converting to German. "We need surgeons. Are you willing to help save lives?" Dr. Weber looked at his colleagues, Dr. Klaus Richter, an orthopedic specialist from Berlin, and Dr. Stefan Müller, a young field medic from Hamburg. None of them had eaten a proper meal in days. Their hands were stained with blood and dirt from operating in bunkers by candlelight. The idea that their captors wanted their medical skills, not their military intelligence, seemed impossible. "There are wounded men here," Morrison continued through the interpreter. "German prisoners among them. They need surgery tonight. Will you help?" Weber's hands trembled as he opened his medical bag. Inside were rusted instruments, torn sutures, and a few remaining vials of morphine he'd been saving for the most desperate cases. When Morrison saw the contents, he didn't laugh or confiscate them. Instead, he led the 3 German doctors to a supply room that made Weber's eyes widen. Shelves lined with sterile instruments gleamed under fluorescent lights. Boxes of fresh bandages, bottles of penicillin, and surgical gloves still in their packaging filled every surface. Weber picked up a scalpel that caught the light like a mirror, sharper and cleaner than anything he'd used since before the war began. "This is cleaner than our hospitals back home," Weber whispered to Richter in German, not realizing that Morrison understood enough to nod. That evening, as Weber scrubbed his hands with actual soap and hot water for the first time in months, he watched American nurses prepare an operating theater that looked like something from a medical textbook. The table was adjustable, the lights were bright enough to see every detail, and there were enough assistants to actually focus on surgery instead of improvising with whatever was available. The first patient was a 19-year-old German private with shrapnel in his abdomen. Weber expected to be watched, guarded, perhaps even prevented from making crucial decisions. Instead, Captain Morrison handed him fresh surgical gloves and said, "He's yours, doctor. Save him." For 8 hours that night, Dr. Weber operated alongside American surgeons, sharing techniques and trading instruments as if they'd worked together for years. When a particularly difficult procedure required a steady hand, Morrison stepped back and let Weber take the lead. When Weber ran low on a specific suture, an American nurse appeared with exactly what he needed. As dawn broke over the French countryside, Weber removed his surgical mask and looked around the recovery ward. German and American soldiers lay side by side, all receiving the same quality care, all monitored by the same dedicated medical staff. For the first time since the war began, he'd practiced medicine the way he'd dreamed of as a young student in Munich, with proper equipment, adequate supplies, and time to actually heal people, instead of just keeping them alive long enough to fight again. The second day brought revelations that shattered Dr. Weber's assumptions about American military medicine. Captain Morrison arrived at breakfast, actual breakfast with eggs, coffee and bread that wasn't mouldy, carrying a thick manual labelled Medical Treatment of Prisoners of War. Weber expected regulations about limiting care or prioritizing American casualties. Instead, Morrison opened to a page that made the German doctor read twice. All wounded personnel, regardless of nationality, shall receive medical treatment according to their medical needs and without discrimination. This is doctrine, Morrison explained through the interpreter, not suggestions, orders. Dr. Richter, the orthopedic specialist, had spent the morning observing American surgical techniques. He approached Weber with an expression of bewilderment. Heinrich, they're using X-ray machines for every fracture, not just the severe cases, every single one. Do you understand what that means? Weber understood. In German field hospitals, X-rays were reserved for officers or cases where life-threatening complications seemed likely. Here, American medics were using advanced diagnostic equipment on captured enemy soldiers as routinely as they used it on their own men. The morning rounds revealed even more surprises. Dr. Muller discovered that American medics were documenting every prisoner's medical condition in detailed charts that would follow them to prisoner of war camps. These weren't basic records noting fit for transport or requires supervision. These were complete medical histories, including surgical procedures, medication allergies, and recommended follow-up care. They're planning for our recovery, Muller told Weber quietly. Not just our survival, our complete recovery. Captain Morrison overheard and nodded. We have prisoners who'll need physical therapy for months. Some will require additional surgeries. The camps have medical facilities specifically designed for long-term care. Weber watched American medics teaching captured German soldiers how to change their own bandages, explaining in broken German when to report signs of infection, and even demonstrating exercises to prevent muscle atrophy during recovery. This wasn't just treatment. It was education designed to help prisoners maintain their health long after leaving the field hospital. The afternoon brought Weber's most shocking discovery yet. While organizing surgical supplies, he noticed that several German prisoners were working alongside American medical staff, not as forced labor, but as trained assistants. A captured German medic named Franz was helping American nurses prepare surgical instruments, his movements confident and his suggestions welcomed. Franz has been here 3 weeks, Morrison explained. He's taught us techniques for treating battlefield hypothermia that we'd never encountered. In exchange, we've shown him advances in infection prevention. Medicine doesn't recognize national boundaries, Dr. Weber. That evening, Weber found himself in the officers' mess tent, sharing dinner with Captain Morrison and discussing surgical innovations as if they were colleagues at a medical conference rather than enemies in wartime. Morrison showed him photographs of American medical schools, describing advances in trauma surgery that had emerged from battlefield experience. When this war ends, Morrison said, medicine will be revolutionized by what we've learned. German doctors, American doctors, British doctors, we've all contributed techniques that will save civilian lives for decades. Weber realized that Morrison wasn't just making conversation. He was sharing professional knowledge with a colleague who happened to wear an enemy uniform. The American captain was treating him not as a prisoner of war, but as a fellow physician whose expertise deserved respect. Now, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time of day this story found you. It's fascinating to know how far these human memories travel. Late that night, Weber wrote in a small notebook he'd managed to keep, "Today I learned that American military medicine operates on principles I thought existed only in peacetime ideals. They're not just treating our wounded, they're teaching us to treat our own wounded better. This is not the enemy I was trained to expect." As he prepared for sleep on a clean cot with actual blankets, Weber wondered if his own government's medical corps would show similar compassion to captured American doctors. The question troubled him, but not as much as the growing realization that everything he'd been told about American barbarism might have been propaganda designed to make surrender seem worse than death. Tomorrow would bring even more surprises that would challenge every assumption he'd held about his captors. Dr. Webber's third morning began with an invitation that left him speechless. Captain Morrison approached with Colonel Patricia Hayes, the regional medical commander, a woman whose authority over battlefield medicine shattered Webber's preconceptions about American military structure. "Dr. Webber," Colonel Hayes said through the interpreter, "Captain Morrison tells me you've developed techniques for operating without electrical power. We'd like you to demonstrate for our medical staff." Webber blinked twice, certain he'd misunderstood. The Americans wanted him to teach them surgery techniques. After spending 2 days marveling at their advanced equipment, they were asking him to share knowledge from Germany's improvised battlefield medicine. "Our medics sometimes operate in forward positions, without generators," Morrison explained. "Your experience with limited resources could save American lives." Within an hour, Webber found himself at the center of a medical seminar, demonstrating how to perform emergency surgery using reflected sunlight and improvised instruments. American doctors and nurses gathered around, taking notes as he explained techniques for maintaining sterile conditions without running water and methods for performing delicate procedures by flashlight. Dr. Richter was simultaneously teaching American orthopedic specialists how to set fractures using materials scavenged from destroyed equipment. His techniques, born from months of operating without proper splints or casting materials, fascinated American doctors who realized these methods could prove invaluable in remote combat zones. "In Berlin," Richter explained through the interpreter, "I learned to set a compound fracture using wooden boards from ammunition crates and strips of cloth from uniforms. Not ideal, but it saved limbs when conventional materials weren't available." Colonel Hayes observed the exchange with obvious interest. "Dr. Richter, would you be willing to document these techniques? Our field manual could benefit from your innovations." Webber watched his colleague's face transform from confusion to professional pride. After months of feeling like battlefield medicine was a crude approximation of real surgery, Richter was being asked to contribute to official American medical protocols. The most remarkable moment came when Dr. Mueller discovered that American medics had been struggling with a specific type of shrapnel wound that German field hospitals encountered frequently. Muller's technique for extracting embedded metal fragments without causing additional tissue damage had evolved from treating hundreds of similar cases on the Russian front. "Show me," said Major Sarah Chen, an American trauma surgeon who'd been observing Muller's patient examinations. For the next 3 hours, Muller worked alongside Major Chen, demonstrating his extraction method on practice models while explaining the anatomical considerations that made his approach successful. Chen contributed her own refinements based on American surgical tools, creating a hybrid technique that proved more effective than either method alone. "This is extraordinary," Chen told Morrison later. "Dr. Muller's approach reduces surgical time by 40% and minimizes nerve damage. We should integrate this into our trauma protocols immediately." Webber realized he was witnessing something unprecedented: enemy physicians collaborating to advance medical knowledge in real time, with both sides contributing expertise that would ultimately save lives on all sides of the conflict. The afternoon brought an even more surprising development. Colonel Hayes approached the 3 German doctors with a proposal that left them stunned. "We're establishing a prisoner-of-war medical corps," she explained. "Captured medical personnel who volunteer would work alongside American medics in POW camps, maintaining their professional skills while ensuring proper medical care for German prisoners. You'd retain your rank, receive appropriate compensation, and continue practicing medicine under Geneva Convention protections." Webber looked at his colleagues, seeing his own amazement reflected in their faces. The Americans weren't just treating them humanely. They were offering them the opportunity to continue their medical careers as prisoners of war. The camps have hospitals that need experienced surgeons, Morrison added. German prisoners deserve medical care from doctors who speak their language and understand their concerns. This benefits everyone. Dr. Muller was the first to respond. We would still be practicing medicine? Professional medicine, Colonel Hayes confirmed. With proper equipment, adequate supplies, and the opportunity to contribute to medical research that could benefit prisoners and civilians alike. You'd be doctors first, prisoners second. That evening, Weber found himself in an impromptu medical conference with American doctors, sharing techniques and discussing innovations that emerged from different battlefield experiences. An American surgeon named Captain Roberts had developed a new approach to treating combat burns. Weber contributed insights about preventing infection in field conditions. Together, they sketched modifications that improved both techniques. Heinrich, Dr. Richter said quietly, as they prepared for sleep. I joined the Wehrmacht because I believed we were fighting for German medical advancement. But I think I've learned more about medicine in 3 days with these Americans than I learned in 2 years on the Eastern Front. Weber nodded, understanding exactly what his colleague meant. Here, medicine was advancing through collaboration rather than competition, through sharing knowledge rather than hoarding secrets, through treating all wounded as patients rather than sorting them by nationality. As he wrote in his notebook that night, Weber reflected on a day that had transformed him from prisoner to colleague, from enemy to teacher, from captive to contributor. The Americans had somehow created an environment where being captured felt more like joining a medical fellowship than surrendering to an enemy. The 4th day brought a moment that would forever change Dr. Weber's understanding of American military ethics. A convoy of severely wounded German prisoners arrived from the front lines, including a Waffen-SS officer whose uniform bore symbols that made even Weber uncomfortable. The officer, Hauptsturmführer Kurt Brandt, was conscious despite severe injuries and immediately began demanding special treatment, threatening consequences if he wasn't separated from common soldiers. Weber expected the Americans to either ignore these demands or respond with anger. Instead, Captain Morrison's reaction surprised everyone. Dr. Weber, Morrison said calmly, this patient requires immediate surgery for internal bleeding. His political affiliations are irrelevant in my operating theater. Can you assist? Weber watched as American medical staff treated Brandt with the same professional care they provided to every other patient. No special accommodations for his SS rank, but also no discrimination based on his unit's reputation. Just medicine. Pure, ethical medicine focused solely on preserving life. During the surgery, Brandt continued making inflammatory remarks that the interpreter reluctantly translated. Weber cringed at his countryman's behavior, but Captain Morrison never wavered. When Brandt demanded to be treated only by German doctors, Morrison quietly replied, Dr. Weber is performing your surgery. I'm assisting because 4 hands are better than 2 when saving a life. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Weber and Morrison worked in perfect synchronization, their focus entirely on the complex procedure required to stop Brandt's internal bleeding. Political differences became irrelevant when faced with anatomical challenges that demanded complete concentration. After the surgery, as they cleaned up, Morrison made a comment that crystallized everything Weber had been experiencing. That man represents ideology that disgusts me. But when he was on my operating table, he was just another human being who needed medical care. That's what separates medicine from politics, Dr. Weber. We heal bodies, not beliefs. Later that afternoon, Weber witnessed another defining moment. A young American medic, Private Johnson, had lost his brother in fighting against SS units. When assigned to monitor Brandt's recovery, Johnson approached Morrison with obvious distress. Sir, I request assignment to different patients. I don't think I can remain professional with this one. Morrison nodded understandingly. Private Johnson, I respect your honesty. Dr. Mueller will handle this patient's care. But remember, We're better than our enemies, not because we're stronger, but because we maintain our principles even when it's difficult. Weber realized he was observing a military medical corps that prioritized ethics over emotions, professional duty over personal revenge, and medical principles over political considerations. This wasn't weakness or naivety. It was strength of character that impressed him more than any advanced equipment or abundant supplies. The evening brought Dr. Weber's final major revelation. Colonel Hayes gathered the 3 German doctors for what Weber expected would be their formal assignment to prisoner of war facilities. Instead, she presented them with an unexpected choice. Gentlemen, based on your contributions here and your professional conduct, we're offering you 3 options, she began. First, standard transfer to POW medical facilities where you'd work under supervision. Second, volunteer assignment to our prisoner medical corps with greater autonomy and research opportunities. Third, she paused, looking at each of them carefully. Third, participation in our international medical exchange program. You'd work directly with American medical units, documenting innovative techniques and contributing to medical research that could benefit wounded soldiers of all nationalities. This would require your word of honor not to attempt escape or engage in intelligence gathering, but would allow you to practice medicine at the highest level. Weber felt his heart stop. They were offering him the opportunity to continue practicing advanced medicine as a prisoner of war, contributing to research that could save lives on both sides of the conflict. Dr. Richter spoke first. We would be trusted to work alongside American medical staff. Trust must be earned, Colonel Hayes replied. But Captain Morrison believes you've already demonstrated the professional integrity necessary for this responsibility. Your medical ethics appear to transcend national boundaries. Weber thought about the past 4 days. The shared surgical techniques, the collaborative problem-solving, the mutual respect between enemy physicians united by common purpose. He thought about Captain Morrison's unwavering commitment to treating all patients with dignity, regardless of uniform or nationality. Colonel Hayes, Weber said slowly, I believe medicine should serve humanity, not politics. If you're willing to trust German doctors to uphold that principle, then I'm willing to prove that trust is justified. Dr. Meller and Dr. Richter quickly voiced similar commitments. The 3 men who had arrived as defeated prisoners were volunteering to become medical ambassadors, choosing collaboration over resistance, healing over hatred. That night, Weber wrote in his notebook, Today, I learned that dignity isn't something that can be taken away. It's something that must be chosen, maintained, and respected, even in the most challenging circumstances. The Americans have shown me what military medicine looks like when guided by principles rather than prejudice. If this story has moved you, hit the like button. It helps Heinrich Weber's story reach more people and remember what war tried to erase: humanity. As Weber prepared for sleep, he realized that his capture had become liberation, not from physical confinement, but from assumptions about enemies who had turned out to be colleagues, about captors who had become partners in the most important work imaginable, healing human beings regardless of the uniforms they wore. 6 months later, Dr. Weber stood in the medical tent at Camp Barkley, Texas, watching German prisoners of war receiving post-operative care that exceeded anything he'd experienced in civilian hospitals before the war. The desert sun filtered through white canvas, illuminating a scene that had become routine but never ceased to amaze him. Former enemies working together to heal human beings. Weber had been assigned to establish medical protocols for the largest German POW population in the American Southwest. What had begun as a prisoner assignment had evolved into something resembling a medical fellowship at one of America's most advanced military hospitals. Heinrich, look at this, Dr. Richter called from across the tent. He was reviewing X-rays with Major Chen, who had requested transfer to Camp Barkley specifically to continue their orthopedic collaboration. We've reduced recovery time for compound fractures by 60% using the combined technique we developed. D. The hybrid surgical methods born from German battlefield innovation and American technological advancement had been documented in official Army medical manuals. Weber's techniques for operating under field conditions had been taught to American medics deploying to the Pacific Theater. Dr. Muller's shrapnel extraction method had become standard protocol for trauma surgeons across the European theater. But the most remarkable transformation was in the prisoners themselves. German soldiers who had arrived expecting punishment had discovered purpose. Former Wehrmacht medics worked alongside American medical staff, translating for patients, assisting with procedures, and contributing to medical research that advanced treatment for everyone. Weber observed Private Franz Kellner, the captured German medic, who had been working at the field hospital when Weber first arrived. Kellner now supervised a team of German and American medics, conducting research on preventing infection in battlefield wounds. His insights, combined with American laboratory resources, had led to innovations that were saving lives across all theaters of war. Dr. Weber, Colonel Hayes approached with a thick folder. "I have news that might interest you." She opened the folder to reveal correspondence from medical institutions across America. Harvard Medical School has requested documentation of your field surgical techniques for their trauma surgery curriculum. Johns Hopkins wants to publish Dr. Richter's orthopedic innovations. The Mayo Clinic is asking if any of you would be interested in post-war research positions. Weber read the letters with growing amazement. American medical institutions weren't just acknowledging German contributions, they were actively seeking continued collaboration after the war ended. "There's more," Colonel Hayes continued. "The International Red Cross has documented our POW medical program as a model for future conflicts. Your work here has helped establish protocols for treating captured medical personnel that prioritize both humanitarian principles and medical advancement." Dr. Mueller joined the conversation, having overheard from his nearby desk where he was training American medics in advanced wound care. "Colonel, we never expected to contribute to anything beyond our own survival. That's exactly why this program succeeded," Hayes replied. "You approach this as doctors first, prisoners second. You've proven that professional dedication transcends national boundaries when guided by ethical principles." The afternoon brought Weber's most meaningful moment yet. A young American soldier, Corporal David Morrison, Captain Morrison's younger brother, had been wounded in the Pacific and transferred to Camp Barkley for specialized surgery. Weber found himself assigned as the primary surgeon for a complex procedure to save the young man's arm. "Dr. Weber," Corporal Morrison said before the surgery, "my brother wrote about working with you in France. He said you taught him that good medicine has no nationality." Weber felt the weight of responsibility and honor in that moment. He was being trusted not just with the life of a patient, but with the brother of the man who had first shown him that enemies could become colleagues through shared commitment to healing. The surgery was successful. Corporal Morrison recovered full use of his arm and returned to active duty. But for Weber, the operation represented something larger, the complete transformation from enemy prisoner to trusted colleague, from defeated soldier to respected physician, from captured enemy to partner in humanity's most important work. As the war drew toward its end, Weber received an unexpected visit. Captain Morrison, now Major Morrison, had been transferred back to the United States and came to Camp Barkley to check on the medical program he had helped establish. "Heinrich," Morrison said, using Weber's first name as he had for months, "I have a proposal. When this war ends, there will be massive medical needs in Germany, hospitals to rebuild, techniques to share, wounds to heal that go far beyond physical injuries. Would you consider working with American medical relief organizations to help rebuild German medical infrastructure?" Weber realized that Morrison was offering him the opportunity to help heal his own country. supported by the same American medical resources and ethical principles that had transformed his understanding of what medicine could accomplish. "I've spent months learning from American medical ethics," Weber replied. "Perhaps it's time to help teach those principles in Germany." That evening, Weber wrote his final entry in the notebook he had kept throughout his captivity. "I came to America as a prisoner of war and discovered I had become a student in the most important medical school imaginable. I learned that healing transcends hatred, that professional excellence has no nationality, and that the highest calling of medicine is to serve humanity regardless of uniform, nationality, or political belief." As the desert sun set over Camp Barclay, Weber watched German prisoners and American medics working side by side in the evening medical rounds. Former enemies had become colleagues, captors had become teachers, prisoners had become partners in advancing medical knowledge that would heal wounds long after the war ended. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell us in the comments which part touched you most. Because sometimes peace begins when we retell the past with empathy. Dr. Heinrich Weber returned to Germany after the war as part of American medical relief efforts, spending the rest of his career establishing medical schools that emphasized international collaboration and humanitarian principles. The techniques developed through German-American medical cooperation during his captivity continued to save lives for decades, proving that even in humanity's darkest moments, healing can transcend hatred when guided by the simple principle that medicine serves all human beings equally.